Do you want to improve the profit margins of your jewelry business or any other handmade business that you might have? I am guessing that the answer to that is yes, and if so, this is the video for you. Today I'm interviewing my friend Jessica Rose of Jewelers Academy, and she is going to share with you 5 very smart ways that you can increase the profit margin on your existing handmade business. Now, she and I have been friends for quite a while now, and she has just released this amazing new book, Start and Grow a Profitable Jewelry Business. And it is packed full of amazing information and tips. And if you have a jewelry business, I recommend that you check this one out. But we're going to get some of the top tips today in this video. All right, you ready for it? Let's dive into the interview. I'm here today with Jessica Rose from the Jewelers Academy. Welcome to the show again, Jess.
Thank you. Yes, lovely to be here. Always love coming on the show. You have a great one.
We've done a few podcast swaps over the years, and it's always a pleasure. We always joke that we're like alternate versions of each other in different countries because our stories are quite similar. Both started kind of making jewelry back in the late 2000s and then went in our own directions. I'm still making the jewelry myself. I've got the teaching business, and Jess now teaches other jewelers how to make jewelry. Can we just have a quick update on what's happened in the last few years with your business?
Sure, yeah. So my business is called Jewelers Academy. And like you said, we teach people how to make jewelry and how to run profitable jewelry businesses. So the last few years, our main focus has been our diploma program. So we have 3. Nobody knows this yet. We're about to launch a 4th diploma program for jewelers. So we start like complete beginner and go through to professional kind of goldsmith and teach people online and send out kits with all the tools and materials. We have students all over the world. So it's been keeping us busy. But it's awesome. And it's lovely to see people's journey and how they go from beginner through to, building these amazing businesses. So it's great.
Yeah, I guess it's almost like the old school apprenticeships, but online these days, where you get that real help and support, and it's a long program where you get a lot of detailed instruction. So I think it's a fantastic program.
Thank you. Yes. And a lot of our mentors, because when people join the programs, they get mentored directly by a jeweler, have done those apprenticeships and then, gone through and have their own businesses. And now they're sort of able to pass it on. So it's really lovely. And it's nice that we can reach people in all corners of the world, because we used to run these in London, in a jewelry school in London. And that was great. But obviously not everybody can get to London for the day. And moms are like, can't fit it in. So the great thing about doing the diplomas online is people can fit them around their schedules. So it's been really nice to see people who couldn't do it before have access to that training now.
Yeah. Now, why I'm having Jess on the show again is, well, first of all, you've just written a book, which is amazing. Congratulations. And this is a very timely topic right now, I think. I mean, it's always a timely topic, but considering post-pandemic, recession, inflation, tough times ahead, potentially for those of us in small creative businesses. So today we want to talk about making your business more profitable. First of all, what is your book about and what is it called?
Yes, thank you. It's called Start and Grow a Profitable Jewelry Business. It will apply to all makers really, but we focus on jewelry because that's our kind of community, I suppose. But it's all about, I started writing the book just about how to start and grow a business, and then a jewelry business. And then I thought, what's the key issue here that most makers face? And the key issue, the reason why people stop, is because they're not making a profit. They're not making enough money, either to be able to get help in, or to be able to grow the business, to be able to buy the tools, or just to enjoy their life. And so they're struggling. And even people who are selling are not always making a profit. I've met lots of makers who may have sold 100 pieces that year, or 200 or 300, but at the end of the day, their bank balance is empty, or even in minus sometimes. And I think that's really sad. And it's not that difficult to turn that around. And I see a lot of people stop their business that they love doing because they feel like it's not possible. They feel like they're not good at making money. But, as creatives, if we're not good at making money, it's not our fault. It's not our skill set a lot of the time. It's not the things that we've learned. It's not what we've done training in. It's not what we've been often encouraged from a young age you know, people often like to tell us, oh, you're so creative, and we pick up that that's what we're good at, but actually it's not that difficult to learn some simple basic rules to make that profitable. It's much harder to learn how to be creative if you've been told you're not creative all your life. So it's really about just making sure that our businesses can thrive, and that we can build these things that are profitable, successful, sustainable, so that we can live the kind of lifestyles we want to live, which I know you teach a lot about this as well, Jess. So it's kind of live aligned.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something I'm super passionate about, is getting people to price correctly for one thing, and just make sure that they are actually making a profit, because that's the point of being a business. Like, if you're not going to make a profit, if you're not going to, you know, actually make money from this and keep that money, then just what's the point? Do it as a hobby, you know? So we need to learn these skills if we're going to be successful in that way. So let's dive in to these 5 ways to make your creative business more profitable. What is the first way?
Yes, thank you. So these are the 5 areas that I look at when I'm working with jewelers one-on-one to grow the profitability in their business. So the first area that we look at are your products, which may sound really obvious, but it's so. And we look at our products from different perspectives. Mm-hmm. And specifically today, I want you to think about the products you have in your business with the hat of profitability on. So we don't always look at them from that perspective. When we're coming up with new designs, we want to take that hat off because we want to be creative and free flowing and not restricted. But today we're thinking, can these products make a profit for me? And there's lots of different ways that you can look at that. So when I'm working with jewelers, we might say, what kind of materials are you using? Are you making mostly silver work? In which case there's a cap on how much you can usually charge for silver, and how many hours is it if it's taking you like a week to make a silver piece, you're not setting yourself up for profit, because we can't usually charge more than, say, 100, maybe 200, maximum 300 for a silver piece. And in a week, we want more than £300. So therefore, we might look at, okay, if your pieces take that long to make, can we work in gold? Can we work in more fine work, so that we're building a product range that is possible to be profitable for you? I mean, that's just one example, and different makers will have different ways of doing it. But it's really thinking about your time, the cost of the materials, and the customer at the end. And what I always ask people is, does it make sense? Does your product make sense to the maker and also to the buyer? And there's some things that you can do around this as well. Like, we might have some products that we call loss leaders, which anyone that did like business studies at school might have learned about, which is this idea that some of our products don't make us much money, or perhaps even just break even, but they lead people to us. So that's more of a marketing spend, you could think of it as. So for example, with jewelers, again, we might make like a big statement necklace that costs, you know, loads of money for us to make, and we know that not many people, if anyone, will buy it. But when we're at a stand or a fair or an event, or even on our website, people will be like drawn to it, like, wow, that's the hero piece. And then they might decide to buy the little pair of stud earrings that have a little element from that piece. So that's one example of a time when you might say, I know this piece doesn't make money, but it's bringing people in. And perhaps I love making it, so I'm going to make it. But then we do need some products in the range that make you money. And also having a look at things like, what are your best sellers? And they're the ones that need to have the most profit in. So if somebody's buying something from you over and over again, they're often the ones where you need to either increase the price in order to bring more profit into your business, or reduce the cost of what it is that is costing you to make that piece, whether that's time or money or whatever else. So it's really just a case of putting that profit hat on and saying, okay, let me look at my products. If I was to sell 100 of these, would I have the money that I want at the end of the day? And if not, it's okay. Like, that's okay. A lot of people, it's like, oh no, even if I sell all my work, I still don't make the money I want to make. So then we work backwards and say, okay, what money do you want to make this year in your business? And how many pieces do you need to sell? And what kind of price point do they need to be at? So we start to have a bit more control over our products in our business, and whether or not we are actually aiming towards a profit. And as makers, that makes us feel a lot more comfortable. It's very uncomfortable to do that work, but once we've done it, we can say, okay, I have a strategy, I have a plan. I know if I sell this many pieces, not only will I have this income, because income and profit are different, but
Mm-hmm.
I will have this much profit, or roughly this much profit. And then you can feel much more confident about spending money in your business because you know what it's leading towards. So products is the first area.
Yeah, that is, Matt, you just like covered so many important points there. The big one that you mentioned, it's an exercise I do in my setup shop course as well, is that idea of how many of these things do you have to sell to make this much money? And honestly, the amount, it blows so many people's minds because they've just never ever thought of that before, and they've never put those numbers down. And it's such a eye opener at, oh, okay, maybe this is, as things stand, this is not going to work because I'd actually have to sell like 1,000 of these things, and that's just not realistic, or whatever, or 10,000 or whatever. And I really like the idea of the loss leader as well, like having that hero product or couple of products, because you can just go to town and like make something that, like a piece of art, that you're not so worried about making it profitable, but that you can use on your marketing materials, that you can use to get press, for example. It's just a great way to get your signature style out into the world, no matter what you make, whatever. We're going to talk a lot about jewelry here because we're both jewelers, so jewelry, you're a jewelry expert, it's going to come up. But all of this stuff can definitely, apply to whatever craft you are or art style you are working in. So that's some excellent pieces of advice there. All right, what's the second thing we're going to be looking at?
Yes, brilliant. Okay, so we've got our products, we've got our product range sort of sorted. So the next thing which you mentioned, Jess, is pricing, which obviously is key to profitability. And I think, it's asking yourself, are you pricing for profit, or is it guesswork? I know someone in our community, they're very honest and lovely, but someone said, the way I price my jewelry is I hold my earrings up to my husband and say, how much would you pay for these? Which I kind of love on one level, but it's also, that's scary. Scary as a business.
Yeah.
Because you don't, again, it's coming back to that. If you did all this work and if you sell all these things, will you have any money at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Not money to like go and buy a limousine, but just money to live and, to just have the lifestyle you want. So, so looking at your pricing and considering whether it's done for profit, have you covered all of your bases in terms of your time, your materials? With jewelry, there's lots of extras. I'm sure there's lots of extras in every industry. So like for us, there's things like hallmarking, postage and packaging and insurance, and of course, all of your overheads. So I would say spend a little bit of time, and Jess, I'm sure you cover this in your courses, but it's also covered in the book, just looking at what is profit. What's the difference between net profit and gross profit? These are the basic numbers you need to know. They can sound scary when you first start out, but once you get to grips with them, you don't need to be an accountant, you don't need to be a finance expert, but just to understand the basics of small business finance, which is, income, sales, revenue are all the same thing. That's just money coming in. So if I sell a piece for £100, that's my income. Sometimes it's called sales, sometimes it's called revenue. And it's confusing because they use lots of different terms to mean the same thing. It's a while to work all that out. And then we have our cost of goods. So the cost of goods is how much you spend to make each piece. So the way that you know your cost of goods is that if you make 10 rings, it costs you 10 times that cost. So for example, if my silver costs £10 each for 10 rings, it's £100. Whereas there are other things like fixed costs or overheads, they mean the same thing. They might be, if I buy a hammer, it costs the same if I make 1 ring or 10 rings. So they're my fixed costs. So just spending a bit of time getting to grips with these basic terms so that you can understand how a business works financially. And like I said, it's nowhere near as scary as it sounds. And once you've got it, it's just like one of those things like riding a bike. You're like, okay, I get it now. I know how to make a profit in a business. And I know where my break-even point is. And again, it's really letting go of perfectionism. So when I first learned this stuff, I had all these spreadsheets and I was like, every day I need to check my profit. And that was too much. But maybe once and definitely once a year to look back and say, what was my net profit? And net profit is what we think of as profit, which is the money we have in our bank kind of at the end of the day. What is my gross profit, and your gross profit is not really profit, but it's how much before all of your overhead. So just looking at the cost of the piece, and after that's taken out, how much money is left. And that's a really good figure to understand the kind of the health of a business, because you can always work on changing those fixed costs. But if your cost of sales, which is like how much it takes you to make the piece, is too high, then you've already set yourself up for failure. So as an industry average, you want your gross profit margin, and I hope I don't lose people at this point, but that's a percent profit. You want that to be around 60%. And your net profit is usually around 20%. So if you look at your gross profit and it's like 80%, or 40%, or it's something completely different, that will have consequences for the profitability of your business. So it sounds harder on a podcast, because when you put it down in numbers, it's kind of much easier to understand. Like we go through it in detail in the book, but also I'm sure like there are resources and things. There's loads of stuff that kind of explain this basic business finance. But once you have that piece, it just means that you are much better placed and better equipped to manage a business and price your jewelry for profit, or your whatever you're making for profit. And I guess the last thing I would say, and I know Jess says this a lot, is don't undercharge. Because when you undercharge, everybody loses. The customer loses because they are confused about what handmade means, that you're giving them an education in that you can buy a handmade piece for less. And then you're attracting bargain hunters, which is not the audience. You lose because, and we say this, like, you wouldn't want a piece that has been made by someone in another country lower than minimum wage, yet you're willing to charge yourself less than minimum wage. So if you look at it from like a fair trade perspective, I think it's a basic ethical standard for yourself to be charging what you need in order to create something sustainable. And just personally, when I buy stuff from makers, I think it's very selfish when they undercharge, because I want to come back to them in a few years and get another piece, and they're not going to get anymore. So yeah, that's the kind of pricing piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, if you just listen to that and you're like, oh my God, what? You need to go back and write down all those names of things and look them up and learn them. Because if you don't know what all those terms mean, you're not running a business with your business hat on, because those are absolutely fundamental, basic numbers when it comes to looking at the health of your business. Because if your business isn't financially healthy, it's not going to be viable in the long term, which is what Jess is saying there at the end. If you underprice yourself, you're going to eventually, your business will fold, because you simply won't be able to keep going, because it's costing you more than you're earning. You'll have to go get a different job, or something else will cause it to fail. Now that there's a lot of stats out there about how risky it is to start a business and how hard it is for businesses to become profitable. I think a lot of that data is really based on brick and mortar businesses, though. They have huge startup costs and ongoing costs to, fit out a brick and mortar space and to pay rent and all. For those of us who have online businesses, or maybe do markets and things like that, or wholesale, we don't have those enormous overhead costs, which is why we can kind of do this sort of scrappy sort of startup and do it from our kitchen table or spare room or whatever. So it might not take as long to become profitable as it would for the other businesses, but there is still, there is a lead time to that. But you do need to understand all those numbers and really, study them. As you said, I like to check in on the health of my business on a monthly basis. I'll go in and look at what my numbers are doing and make sure it's kind of going in the right direction. But honestly, if you've been in business long enough, you can just tell, how things are going. You get a feel for the vibe. It's like, how many sales you generally should be making and how much money you should generally be making on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis. And you kind of start feeling it out and knowing if things aren't going well, but that takes time to develop. So by doing this work up front and learning these what these terms mean and looking at your numbers, there's no point in hiding from it, right, Jess? Like, I think a lot of people sort of bury their heads in the sand because they're a bit afraid of what that's going to show them. Hey, if you're enjoying this episode, please do give me a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of my future videos on how to have a thriving and profitable handmade business. And I just want to tell you quickly about a little freebie I have for you. It is a free ebook called 25 Essential Tips to Running a Handmade Business. I have the link for you in the description below. And hey, if you prefer to watch it in video format, I got you covered. I have it available here, and I'll put the link to that in the description as well. Don't miss that one if you want to grow a thriving and profitable handmade business. That is going to help you out a lot. All right, let's get back to the interview with Jess.
Yeah, absolutely. And money does bring up a lot of fear for people. We talk about this again in the book and just in our courses is, don't ignore that as well. If you need to do your accounts for an hour and then have the day off because you're emotional, and I know it sounds silly, but it can bring up things. It can bring up things from childhood. It can bring up things currently, like if there's fear. Money and fear are very, very related. And often money and safety are very related as well. Like we feel safe if we feel like we're financially stable. So I'd say like if feelings come up, it's not a sign that you shouldn't be doing it. It's just a sign that you maybe need some self-care around that. So whether it's like taking some time off or we like to sometimes tap on the end of something we don't want to do with something we really want to do. So if you've been waiting to make something that perhaps, isn't even going to help your business, but you just want to make it for fun, like give yourself that as the reward. So it's about managing yourself as well, because it can be really triggering, I suppose, talking about money. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It just means that you need to self-care afterwards and maybe do it in little stages. And once you've done it, and then you feel confident, you won't be triggered by it anymore. But I do understand, especially if you've never looked at the numbers before, you might need someone there with you. You might need, someone to come around and ask a friend and be like, can you just watch me while I do my accounts? Because I'm so scared and I just don't want to do it. And so build what you need, like use whatever resources you can find, but don't not do it because it's like Jess said, it's essential.
Yeah. And it's empowering in the true sense. Like once you have that knowledge, you can decide what to do with it and come from a place of knowing what's going on and being realistic with it. And I mean, I personally find that really empowering. I really enjoy that feeling of knowing what's happening, and that I feel like I can make wise choices and decisions moving forward with my business once I come from that place of knowledge rather than a place of ignorance.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, it gives you so much confidence in your business strategy as well. You're like, I know my numbers, I've got a great product, I know what I'm doing. It's just a case of pushing it forward, which is where we come on to number 3.
Yes, let's do it.
Yes. Okay. So number 3 is communication. So we've looked at your products, we've looked at your pricing. Now we look at how you communicate with your customers. Some people call this marketing, but I find when I say the M word, people turn off. So I call it communication. I do think it's a little bit more effective as well, especially with maker businesses, because it's less like what campaign are we going to do? And it's more like, how am I going to talk to people? And the key here for me is asking yourself, how do you like to communicate with people? So instead of doing whatever the latest trend is online, which you may love or you may hate, it's saying, how do you normally communicate? If you look at your behavior in your day-to-day life, how do you like to talk to people? Do you like to call them on the phone? Do you like to WhatsApp all your friends? Do you just like to turn up at their house and have a chat? Do you like dinner parties where there's a whole group of you? Or do you like being one-on-one, like close with an intimate friend? Because they're great signs for how you like to talk to people and communicate, and where your kind of zone of genius is in terms of communication. And I find that when people lean into that is when they're great at communicating, which is also a secret word for marketing, which is a secret word for selling. So that's the first thing, is I'd say, like, how do you like to communicate? I know for me, like, I'm not a big fan of messages or emails or like text-based. I like talking to people, and I like being with people, and I like being with groups, and I like being one-to-one. So they're the places that I am best. It doesn't mean I can't do the other things, but they're the places that I am best. So in my team, I'm lucky to have a team. I don't do the writing most of the time. I have someone who does that. I do like the podcast because I like talking. I do the videos because I like talking, and I do the events because, again, I like talking. When I first started, obviously I had to do everything, but there are things you can outsource as you grow. And also you don't have to do everything. You can find the areas that you like. But I think for Make a Business around communication, what I've been really encouraging our community to do as well is have more conversations about your business, and not just online, not just on Instagram, but to tell people what you're doing regularly, and not in a sales way, but just when you meet up with your friends, say, you know, this is what's happening in my business, and these are my challenges, and these are the things I'm excited about. Because we move on, and the book talks about this, there's 3 stages, generally speaking, of these types of businesses. And the stage 1 is kind of like getting your first £10,000 through the door. And, you know, if your products are about £100 each, that's your first 100 sales. So if you think about your first 100 sales and where they come from, usually they will come from friends and family, people that you already know, and people that they already know. So you probably already know in your extended network about 10 people who are interested in buying your work. You may not think you do, but if you looked at like the school run and the church and the gym and whatever communities you're involved in, you probably would be able to find about 10 people who'd be interested. All of those people probably know about 10 people who would also be interested. That's your first £10,000 in your business. I think the mistake a lot of people make is they're like, I need to set up Instagram and emails and websites. And that's great, because we do need that. That's all for stage 2. But don't expect your initial sales to immediately come from there. That's normally the next stage, sort of 10,000 to sort of 50,000 pounds in your business of income tends to come from online. So I really encourage people to try and talk to at least like 5 people every week about your business, because even if they're not interested, they may know someone who is, and that kind of face-to-face, or it could be like direct messaging, but something personal, not just a sort of put out there message. And you do this, Jess, with even with like your very personal emails that you send on Etsy to people, and kind of following up. That connection is so important. We don't need thousands of customers in our businesses, but we need a deeper connection with a fewer people who are going to help spread the word, and kind of go out there and find that first 100 customers. And then there's some other stages which are quite different, but that stage I think is so important.
That's really great. And I think it's really true what you say. You know, word of mouth is still the most powerful marketing tool there is, because social proof is one of the most powerful marketing strategies, which is, you know, why infomercials work and why the influencer world exists, because people like to hear from people who genuinely recommend things that they like, and then they go buy them, et cetera, et cetera. And that's kind of what we're talking about here in that first stage, is that word of mouth social proof element of things. And obviously, you know, no one will know about your business if you don't talk about it. So you need to get comfortable talking about it. Now, I know a lot of people who aren't comfortable talking about it, especially in the beginning stages. I think there's this kind of weird sense of, oh, it's just a silly little thing I'm doing, rather than this is a business I'm running and I'm serious about it. I still remember my early on, the first few years, I think maybe 2 or 3 years into running my business, one of my cousins at Christmas was like, oh, how's your jewelry business going? You know, like a little bit condescendingly. Yeah. And then I came back and went, oh, great, we made X amount of dollars this year. And the look on his face was like, what? Like, you actually made that much money? And it was quite a heartening moment for me, because I was like, yes, this is serious. You know, it's a real business. It's not just this little hobby thing I'm doing. So, you know, you might be lucky enough to have that sort of experience where you're like, hey, you know, people might not take you seriously, but, you know, you can prove to them that this is serious and it is something that's worthwhile. But you do need to get comfortable talking about it to the people you know, for starters, because if you can't talk about it to the people you know, how are you going to talk about it to the people you don't know? You're not going to be comfortable with it. So yeah, and that deeper connection too, like, I think that's really, really amazing, because if you can make a deep connection with a customer, not only will they potentially come back and buy from you again and again. And I have a lot of wonderful repeat customers who come back and buy from me over and over. But they'll also tell their friends, of course, and they'll be like, and if they wear, especially as a jeweler, if they wear your piece regularly, they'll be able to say, "Oh, I got it from, you know, so and so." So that, I think that's a really important and potentially overlooked part of marketing these days, when we're all about the socials and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the socials are so important for building the long term. But what I find is people get very disheartened because they're like, I posted and I'm being ignored. Whereas if you've got those first, even your first 10 customers, and they're sharing on social media, and then you get, you know, another 10 and they start interacting, you're building this community of people that you know anyway, and then you're just kind of following up online. And then that kind of has this gravitational effect that other people start to come in. And I think that, yeah, I do totally understand the frustration of starting an Instagram account and just shouting into the ether. And I think I want to kind of avoid that pain for people as much as possible. So yeah, getting some more kind of personal connections. And I remember when I started my business, my sister, it's worth being very tenacious, you know, if you can. I remember she said to me, "Oh, can you make me one of those rings, Jess?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." I was like, "And I'll give it to you, but you need to bring me 10 customers based on me giving you this ring." And she was like, "That's fine. I'm going out tonight. I'll tell everyone." And I'm sure she did. I'm sure she's done that like 5 times over. So use the people in your network who are good at putting you out there. You don't have to just sell yourself, you know, get people who are going to shout about you, and you can bribe them with jewelry or whatever. So get other people to use their, if that's, you know, I'm not that good at being like, come buy my stuff, but I am good at being like, you go and get those people to go and buy my stuff. It's use when you're sort of communicating. Yeah.
I think my mum's probably told more people about my business than I have over the years. So, you know, leverage the family and your friends who are happy to support you. Okay, what are we up to? Number 4.
Yes, number 4. So number 4, another really important one is how you spend your time. So this is your kind of, it combines like your time management, but also what you're doing in your business. And I always ask, you know, especially if you're a bit further along, are there any things that you're doing in your business that someone else could do way better for less time? And remember that time and money are very related. So it can be quite scary to start outsourcing or to start getting help in your business. But and often we're sort of like, well, when I've got enough money, then I'll hire someone. But the problem is, you reach this stage, if you're feeling very busy and kind of like you can't fit it all in, you're not able to bring the money in, getting someone to help, and we'll talk about some different ways in which that could be, maybe the thing that turns you from not profitable to profitable. So it sounds counterintuitive. And I remember my first hire, I got an assistant 1 day a week, and I wasn't making any profit at this point. So it was scary for me to hire someone, but I thought, if I don't have this person, and it was kind of a little bit easier for me to choose because I was teaching classes, and while I was teaching classes, I was missing bookings for the next classes. So I knew that I needed someone to take those calls. An answer machine isn't quite the same. And I kind of said, you know, more income will come in through that. But there were lots of different things that she helped me with. And like, I think 3 weeks later, I was like, can you do 2 days a week? And then like a few months later, I was like, can you work full time? So, you know, that kind of snowballed. But there's lots of ways that makers can outsource things. So photography is one of the key first things that we do. If you're spending days, weeks, hours trying to do your own photography, and you're spending money on all the equipment and all of this, and you don't enjoy it, and you could be spending that time building your product collection, working on these conversations. Communication is the one thing that I wouldn't outsource. Because that's your direct line to your customer. That's a personal connection, especially in the early days. But pretty much anything else, accountancy, even some of the making, you know, for jewelers that might be polishing up all the pieces can take hours, whereas you can pay someone £6 to polish your piece. It's a no-brainer. There may be parts of the making process, especially if you're doing more batch creation, that you can outsource. So outsourcing is one area. If you're not ready to outsource yet, are you being conscious about how you're spending your time in your business? And I think this isn't about doing more. Most of us need to do less. Most of us are doing too much, working too hard. And actually in just, 4 hours a day, or sometimes half an hour a day if you're working part-time, you can run a thriving, successful business. But you need to be intentional about how you're spending that time. So for me, I always know the day before what I'm doing the next day. So I'll never come to my bench or to my desk and be like, what shall I do today? Because I'll procrastinate, I'll get confused, I'll write to-do lists, it will be a whole mess. Whereas I know the day before, okay, this morning I'm doing this podcast, and then I've got another appointment, and then I've got some time to go for a walk, and then I'm picking my son up. I've got it kind of planned out, and it may not go exactly to plan, but it means my brain can start working on that in the background the day before. And when I come to do it, there's no time wasted kind of thinking about what I'm going to do. So that's one really important thing, blocking out time. And again, putting that profit hat on and saying, are the things that I'm doing in my business making me money? And one thing I'd recommend doing is at least once a quarter in your business, doing something that we call a revenue generating activity. So this is something that is aimed to bring money in. And it might be that you're doing a fair or an event. So you sell your jewelry, that's revenue generating. Hopefully, obviously you can't control what happens, but generally, if you're a purely online business, you might do like a little launch and say, for this week only, if you buy one of my mugs, you get an egg cup for free. I'm not great at non-jewelry analogies. Free egg cup, but we try and encourage bonuses over discounts for makers who don't like to discount too much. It can even be free postage for a week, but something where you're saying, I'm making a targeted effort every 90 days in my business to bring in money. So we're not just sitting back and waiting and hoping and crossing our fingers, but we have a bit more control, and we're saying, okay, I've tried this one, I've tried that one. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work. It's just the intention to, this week I'm going to bring money into my business. And some of them will be successful, some of them won't. But that way we kind of learn and grow. So yeah, it's being intentional about your time and how it's going to lead to profit. But also making sure you're looking after yourself and having time off as well.
Yeah, definitely. I always say to people, like, you need to spend either time or money to grow your business, because time is money. So there comes a point where you don't have any more time to spend. And so maybe you do need to spend a bit of money by outsourcing, as you were saying. Outsourcing bookkeeping was the first thing I outsourced. To be fair, I outsourced it to my husband for free. And great, if you can do that, fantastic. And also just on that topic, I always like to make the point, because most of the people in my community are women, and a lot of them are the main homemaker, for example. They might be staying at home with kids or in that stage of life. But don't just think about how you can outsource business things. What about everything else? Like all the domestic stuff? Like, can you outsource it to your children? Can you outsource it to a spouse? Can you outsource it to a cleaner or buying foods or whatever, meals for a week just to give yourself a break? Whatever it is, think of all areas of the life that you're in charge of, and go, where can I get myself more time? Not only, as you said, to do more work, but also just to exist and have that downtime and self-care time as well, because that is just as important as anything else. Otherwise you end up burning out and you can't do anything. So yeah, I think that's incredibly important, is that ability to think of your time and think of the best way to spend your time. And that may mean hiring people. I employ Nick full-time now, and I have for a couple of years now, and he does a lot of stuff in the business. And we're just in a fortunate position that, he was interested in coming on board and being part of it. So I didn't have to outsource to someone else. I could just keep it in-house, so to speak, which works really nicely. And I know there's a lot of couples who are in that situation that I've talked to over the years. So, that's always a potential as well. Okay,
I love that. Outsourcing the other things in your life, because you're right, everything that you're doing is your life. So making time, and something that I kind of talk about quite a lot is the rest or the downtime in your business. It's part of your business, I think we often think like, oh, I'll stop my business work to like go for a walk. That's part of my working day, and it has to be. And actually, you know, having that time and that space brings up creative ideas, brings up solutions. A big part of being a business owner is problem solving and taking risks. And you need energy from which to make good decisions on both of those things. Otherwise, it could be interesting. It could be an interesting ride. So seeing it not as a luxury or even a reward, but actually as an essential part of your business strategy, I think is really important. It's something I've come to do over the years.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I've had my best ideas usually walking in the shower or just before falling asleep. Those are kind of the periods where I tend to have the best ideas. By the way, if you can hear some banging in the background, it's because there are fireworks at the school because it's Christmas, just before Christmas as we're recording this. And it's the evening for me. So yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but that's what it is if you're curious. Okay, so let's talk about number 5, final 5. What is the last thing that we want to look at?
Yeah, so the number 5 is it kind of brings a lot of it together, but your business model. So we look at your business model, or you might call it your strategy, but it is essentially like, what is the plan here? And again, does it make sense? So it's not about having like an MBA in this stuff. It's a lot of it is common sense. It's like, does this work? You know, looking at it objectively. And it's hard to do that for your own business, but trying to take out the emotion and the connection and just saying, does this kind of work? And we're looking at, in this one, where you're selling your work, who your customers are, and whether it all kind of fits together to make sense. So in a jewelry business, we've kind of identified some key business models, and I'm sure they'll apply to lots of other industries as well. So one of them is selling more like wholesale through shops and galleries. So you're making multiples of each piece. There needs to be a high profit margin in these pieces because there needs to be profit for you, the maker, and profit for the shop. So if that's your main model, and I do recommend having a main business model, what normally happens with maker businesses is we start out and then we do all the business models. We're like, I'm going to sell at fairs, events, one-to-one. I'm going to maybe
I did. Yeah.
I'll just do all of it. I'll sell on Etsy. I'll have a website, maybe folksy as well. Like we'll just, and there's nothing wrong with that. I call that the experimentation phase. And I definitely spent a long time there. But in order to actually grow and have a profitable business, you need to slim it right down, focus, and pick one main area. It doesn't mean you can't do anything else, but one key area, which you did, Jess, when you kind of focused on your Etsy and your, you know, selling online, and also your product range was very slimmed down and focused, and you just went all in. And then once that had built, you were able to do more of the teaching business. And so it doesn't mean that you're restricted forever, but in order to build something, you kind of need to focus on that one thing. So looking at your business model, so are you selling wholesale, which means you need to be able to make quite a few pieces, not always loads, it might just be 10, but make some sort of batch and also have enough profit in those for the two sides? Are you doing commissions like one-to-one pieces, one-off pieces? In which case you're probably going to need a higher price point. You definitely need a higher price point. And you're going to be selling less of them. So again, with jewelers, they might just sell one piece a month and they might cost like $3,000. Or it might be like 2 or 3 pieces a month that are £1,000 each, or whatever it is. So does that make sense? Or you might be somewhere in between. You might be selling online. Your pieces might be like 100 to 300. It is a lot easier for makers to sell either under 300 or over 800. So that middle bracket is really challenging, just so you know. So if you're in that middle bracket, I would encourage you to pick a side. Doesn't mean you can't have anything in the middle, but don't have all your stuff between 300 and 800. People really can't choose at that point. If it's under 300, they're kind of like, let's go. If it's over, it's like, yeah, I'm ready to invest. But in the middle, it's just like, it's too much, or is it too little? I don't know. I'm confused. I'm lost. So yeah, I would say pick a side.
I wonder how that translates to dollars. Like if it's like $300 to $800 would be similar, or whether it's a higher price point for dollars.
I don't know what the exchange rate is. It's so I'm trying to think what £300 would. Yeah, we'd have to look it up. We'll have to look it up.
I mean, for me, just off the top of my head, for Australian dollars, £300, it's probably like 2/3 of that. So so quite a lot more, like $500 would be
Yeah,
the
so it's still
equivalent of £300.
yeah, it's kind of the
Mm.
amount you might spend on your partner at Christmas. Like it's,
Yeah, okay.
well, I mean, I guess that's subjective, but
Yeah.
it's an important gift, but it's not like your engagement ring. It's
Yeah.
not like
Probably similar then, I would say. Like a couple of $100 is kind of, and
yeah,
then over 1,000 maybe, would be
yeah,
like that's a really big investment piece.
yeah.
Mm.
So it's easier if you kind of pick a side
Mm-hmm.
and move towards a side, or perhaps have pieces in each.
Mm.
But yeah, and again, it's making decisions like what is your price point bracket and who is your customer, and
Mm.
really kind of targeting them. So all of this stuff obviously takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think I really want people to know, like, if you don't know any of this, or if it feels new, or if it feels like a lot, we are cramming a lot in, but also don't feel bad. Like,
Mm.
I didn't know anything about running a business before I started. And it's not, sometimes I think with business, we feel like we should just know. And if
Mm.
we don't know, we're not good enough. But actually, like, none of us know, but we can learn. And these are skills that I've learned. I've been on hundreds of business courses over the years, and I love learning about this stuff. So, and I know, Jess, you're similar, you're always learning new things. So it's really taking the shame
Mm.
out of, if you don't have a profitable business, it's not your fault, but there are things we can do to make it profitable. So looking at your business model, making some conscious decisions,
Mm.
focusing in on a key area of growth, and just committing to it and going for it. And if you do that, it will work. It may take time, but if you don't give up, it will work. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist or a genius or have any special skills. It's just about kind of slimming it down, making sure it makes sense from a business perspective, and just keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. It's all about consistency. It's all about just keeping on plugging along, believing you can do it, and learning everything you need to learn. And you can, you're capable of it. I had no idea either. I knew none of this when I started, and that's normal. I think it's important to just realize that that's normal, and don't beat yourself up about it. Just learn the lessons. And it's funny, I think probably for Jess and I, who've mentored and taught so many people over the years, you see the same learning curve from everybody who goes through this. Like, there's the rare person who might have a corporate business background who kind of jumps in with that knowledge intact, but the vast majority of you do not have that background, and you're on the same journey as everybody else, and that's absolutely fine and normal. And you can take heart in that and go, hey, that's where we all started. Look at our, and not just us two, but all the people who are successful, the majority of them started from that point, and they've all managed to make it work. That means you can too. So I think that's, I personally, if I was listening to this back then, I'd be like, oh, that's nice to hear. I'm not alone here. I'm not this weird outlier who doesn't understand this stuff. It's in fact a normal place to be. And it's just by investing in ourselves and investing in our knowledge that we are going to be moving forward. And if you've watched or listened to this entire episode, then you are like already doing an awesome job, because Jess has shared so many good tips throughout this episode. Jess, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. Now, I'm assuming all of this is also in your book, in probably more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. It's available on Amazon. Start and Grow a Profitable Jewelry Business. And like I said, it is aimed at jewelers, but everyone who's read it has said it kind of works generally across the board for makers. So if you're interested, then check it out. And yeah, we kind of cover it in more detail, how you can, and kind of flesh out practically how you can create these steps. And it's also meant to be kind of a companion. So as well as like a guide, it's got lots of stories of makers and how they've been successful. And I think the lovely thing I learned about doing those case studies with, I think we had about 10 jewelers, is just they all do it in different ways. And they've all found their own path, and some of them are really successful and have huge shops and sell all over the world, and some of them have their little like she cave in their house, and they make and just do it on the weekends, that have like a side business and everything in between. So I know I've learned so much from creating it and just being part of that kind of community, and I'm sure you have as well, Jess. But your one, and yeah, it's just been lovely to kind of put together and see how it's going to help people to build their businesses going forwards.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on the book. I can't wait to read it. I'm awaiting my copy. And for those, and I will put a link to it in the show notes and below the YouTube video as well for anybody who wants to go check it out. Again, the title is Start and Grow a Profitable Jewellery Business. I'm assuming by Jessica Rose on the cover as well. And I'll also put a link, of course, to Jess's Jewelers Academy. So if you are a jeweler and you are interested in deepening your practice and learning more and expanding your skill base, then I strongly recommend that you check out her classes because they are fantastic. So as always, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Always fun to catch up and chat and see what's going on with your business. So thank you so much for coming on the show again today, Jess.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jess. Lovely to have you and lovely to see what you're doing as well. Can't wait to see what's next for you guys in the community going forwards.
Bye.
Bye.
And that is it. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, again, please do give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments below what your biggest takeaway from today's video has been. Before you do go, I want to give you a link to something that's going to be super duper helpful. It's a video I did on handmade pricing formulas, and I have the formula that I recommend my students use, and I explain exactly why you should use this formula and why most of you are messing up and underpricing your work because you're forgetting a crucial part of the process. So I'm going to cover that in this video for you. Watch that one next. Thank you so much for watching this video today, and I'll catch you again in the next one. Bye for now.